Is video game crunch okay? In one of Joe Rogan's recent podcasts, he had John Carmack, who is the programmer of Doom and one of the founders of ID Software. And during the interview, he talked about the games industry's practice of crunch. And if you don't know what crunch in the video game industry is when programmers are pushed to work just absurd hours, oftentimes 80 to 100 plus hours a week, to push a game out to make sure that it gets released when it's supposed to be released, to get everything polished and make sure everything is working. Now, during this podcast, Joe Rogan asked John Carmack about video game crunch and whether or not he thinks laws should be put in place to limit or completely eliminate crunch and make it illegal for these companies to let their workers work these many hours. And John Carmack pretty much just came out and said no, he doesn't believe there should be laws, and that's really, he thinks, for a lot of games these days, it's almost necessary for people to crunch, and that it's something that is a good thing. And one of the things he says is that sometimes there shouldn't be a work-life balance. Sometimes your work is your life, it's your life's work. And I think for certain people, that's true, but for others it's not, right? I mean, this guy was a millionaire by the time he was in his 20s, and he even said that he works an average of 13 hours a day, and that he feels bad if he works less than 60 hours a week. Now, that is possible and a great thing for some people. Some people thrive on that kind of lifestyle, and some people are just kind of built for that kind of mentality of work. But other people obviously are not, right? Some people value their free time more than their work time. And I think that, my opinion is John Carmack here is a little maybe short-sighted. I don't think that there should be a law in place that should limit how much someone is allowed to work. However, I do think there should be no punishment for an employee who does not want to work that many hours. I think that there should be a set number of hours, let's say 40 hours a week, that a developer or programmer should work, and any amount over those 40 hours is optional, right? It's not mandatory. It's when you make the crunch hours mandatory, when you tell your employees, hey, listen, you've got to be here 80, 100 hours this week, or else we're letting you go, or we're going to do something about that. We're going to have a talk with you. Recently there's been a big debate about whether or not the games industry should unionize to stop these kind of practices from happening. Workers are starting to speak out. Games like Red Dead Redemption 2, stories have come out about how much the developers worked on that game and how hard they had to crunch just to get it out by the release date. And, I sympathize with them. I really do. And I think it's a horrible thing to make your employees work that many hours. And one of the things that John Carmack says is that sometimes workers need to work this many hours in order to get games out, and that if workers never did crunch, right, if these companies never made their workers crunch, that we would not be in the position we are today. And John made a statement that if workers did not work the crunch hours, the really long, insane hours, that we would not have all the games that we do today. That the games industry is unique and that it needs the crunch hours. That's kind of what he was getting at. And I have to completely disagree. Yeah, sure, we've gotten more games maybe in a shorter amount of time because developers have had to crunch, but that doesn't mean that the same game can't come out just at a later date. And me as a consumer, I'm completely willing to wait a little longer for a game or something to come out if I know that the employees were treated right and they weren't worked to death. So, I mean, all in all, I get where Carmack's mindset is, right? He's a hard worker, he loves to work, and he thinks that everybody else should too. And I think, yes, you should work. I just don't think it should be mandatory to jeopardize your health or your work-life balance to put out a product that otherwise could come out in the same state just a little later. So, with that being said, what do you think? Do you think video game crunch is a good or a bad thing? Do you think these employees have rights not to work such long hours? Do you think companies should institute some sort of policy to make it optional to work longer hours? Or do you think that there should just be a law in place, put in place by the government to limit how many hours a person can work and make it illegal to work any longer than that? So yeah, anything you think, just comment down below. Remember to like and subscribe if you want more videos. That's it.